The storm had passed, but the sky still wept. Rain fell over the wreckage scattered across the flooded moon. Metal floated in pools of dark water. Fires hissed and died. The research ship was gone. Torn apart by impact and weather, some of the bodies had already sunk. Others floated silently, faces turned to the clouds, and under a broken escape pod, half sunk in thick water. A small alien girl was trapped. She had long silver hair that clung to her face. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes wide with fear. Water was rising fast. She pushed against the metal beam, pinning her leg. But it didn't move. Her screams were quiet. Her strength was fading. She was alone. Her crewmates were gone. Her voice was never loud, and now it was nearly gone. She had no reason to think anyone would come. But just as her head slipped under the surface, a shadow moved in the rain. Carter, a human man with a torn jacket and bleeding arms, stood at the edge of the water. He had survived a crash of his own. His ship went down hours before hers. He had followed the smoke, hoping for parts, maybe shelter. What he found was a dying ship and something moving under the water. He dropped his pack without a word and dived in. The water was cold, black, and full of debris. Carter pushed through sharp metal and broken panels. Then he saw her eyes wide, hands weakly pushing against the water. She didn't even struggle when he reached her. She simply looked at him. He pulled at the metal beam. It didn't budge. He braced his back against the pod wall and pushed harder. With a loud crack, the beam shifted. The girl floated upward. Limp Carter grabbed her and kicked toward the surface. They burst through the water with a gasp. Rain hit their faces as he swam to shore. He dragged her body to the edge and laid her down on soft mud. She wasn't breathing. No, he whispered. He pressed his hands on her chest and began to push. 1, 2, 3. Her chest rose, then fell, then nothing. Carter leaned down and breathed air into her mouth. Her chest moved again, and suddenly, scoffed water sprayed from her lips. She rolled to her side and gasped for air. Alive, Carter. Sat back, shaking, soaked, and bleeding, but smiling. She looked up at him through wet hair, confused, afraid, her voice barely a whisper. Why? Carter reached into his jacket and pulled out a small blanket. He wrapped it around her shoulders. You're safe now, he said. I've got you. She didn't understand his words, but she understood the tone. Warm, soft, not like the voices of the commanders or scientists. His eyes didn't look at her like an object. They looked at her like she mattered. Carter stood and offered her his hand. She took it slowly, her small fingers trembling. He led her through the rain, past the wreckage and smoke, toward a cave he had found earlier, dry, hidden, and safe inside. He started a small fire with a plasma torch. She sat near it, shivering, still wrapped in the blanket. He gave her a packet of dried fruit and some water. She sniffed it, then ate slowly, carefully. He watched her, not speaking, letting her feel safe. After some time, she looked up at him again. What's your name? She asked in her own tongue. Carter didn't understand, but he smiled and pointed to himself. Carter, then he pointed to her. She hesitated, then said softly, Lear. Carter repeated it awkwardly. She smiled a little, the first time. Since the crash, that night, she sat by the fire, watching him repair a broken comlink. He talked to himself while he worked. She didn't understand the words, but his voice kept her calm. She touched the edge of the blanket and held it tightly. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel abandoned. As she drifted into sleep, her fingers curled around the blanket. Her mind still heard water, metal, screams. But this time, there was also a voice. A human voice that said, I'm not going to leave you. The cave was warm now. The fire burned low but steady. Outside, the storm had calmed, but the sky was still dark. The smell of smoke drifted in from the wreckage far behind them. Ilari sat near the fire, her knees pulled close to her chest. The blanket Carter gave her was wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her skin still shivered sometimes, not from cold, but from memory, the water, the metal. The fear it all clung to her, like it didn't want to let go. Carter moved quietly, setting up small tools and broken parts from his pack. He didn't speak much, but every time Ilari looked up, he was there, always close, always calm. It was strange for her. Her people didn't believe in showing weakness. They didn't believe in kindness from outsiders. And yet, here she was, breathing beside a human, still alive because he had jumped. In for her, without reason, without knowing her name, without being asked. She watched him now, curious. His hands worked fast, rewiring a cracked transmitter. He muttered under his breath. The words made no sense to her, but the tone did. He was frustrated, but not angry. Her voice was soft when she spoke. "Why did you save me?" Carter looked up, confused. He didn't speak her language, but the way she stared at him made him pause. He smiled gently and tapped his chest. Then he pointed at her and placed his hand over his heart. "I couldn't leave you," he said. "Not when I could help." Ilari didn't understand the words, but her eyes softened. She felt the meaning, and that was enough. He gave her a fresh bottle of water and another food pouch. She accepted it with both hands. In her culture, that meant respect. Carter didn't know, but it made her feel less alone. Later that night, Carter pulled a small projector from his pack. It flickered to life, showing a rotating map of nearby systems. He tapped a red-marked sector flashing with a warning. "This moon," he said, pointing. "No help coming, no signal going out." Ilari watched the lights spin slowly in the air. She understood part of it. They were stranded, trapped, alone together. But even in that truth, she didn't panic. Because now, she wasn't alone, and somehow, that made it bearable. She reached out and pointed at the blinking light on the edge of the map, a planet far beyond the red zone. Carter raised an eyebrow. "You know that place?" he asked. Ilari nodded. Slowly, her voice was soft. "Home." The word made Carter pause. He looked at her again, really looked, and for the first time, he realized she wasn't just a survivor. She was someone trying to return. That night, Ilari had dreams. She saw the ocean again, not drowning, but floating above her. Stars moved like waves, and in the dream, she heard Carter's voice. Not in words, but in feeling. A promise, "I'm still here." She woke up gasping, heart pounding. Carter was nearby, half asleep, but he stood the moment she moved. He brought her water, helped her sit up. She clung to his hand like it was the only thing keeping her in place. And maybe it was. Carter didn't ask what she dreamed. He just sat beside her and waited for her breath to slow. And in that silence, something changed. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he didn't move away. The next morning, they left the cave. They needed parts, maybe a working beacon. The wreckage of her ship was nearby. It was dangerous, but they had no other choice. As they walked, Ilari stayed close. She still limped from the crash, and Carter slowed his pace to match hers. He kept glancing at the sky. The clouds were thinning. But danger always found its way back. When they reached the remains of her ship, Ilari froze. Bodies floated in the water. Friends, officers, people she knew, gone. Carter placed a hand on her back. Gently, she looked at him, tears forming but not falling. "We don't cry in front of outsiders," she whispered in her own tongue, but her voice cracked, and Carter simply said, "I'm not leaving." He couldn't understand her words, but he understood grief. He stood beside her as she bowed her head, as she gave a silent goodbye to the ones she had lost. Then they worked, side by side, pulling what they could from the broken ship. Carter found a weak signal booster. Ilari found a sealed data crystal, its glow still strong. They looked at each other, and for the first time, they felt like a team. As the sun set again over the broken moon, they returned to the cave, not as strangers, but as something more. Not family. Not yet, but not alone either. And in the quiet night, Carter whispered to himself, "She's still breathing, and so am I." The cave was still, but Carter couldn't sleep. He lay with his back against the wall, rifle beside him, eyes open. Ilari was curled under the blanket across the fire, her breathing soft and steady. She had finally begun to sleep without fear, but Carter couldn't relax. Something didn't feel right earlier that day. He had seen movement in the water near the wreckage. Not a fish, not falling metal, something watching. He had turned fast, weapon ready, but nothing was there. Just ripples, fading into silence. Now, the fire crackled low, and the night air pressed in. Carter stepped outside quietly, careful not to wake her. The moon above was cracked and gray. The sky was black, dotted with unfamiliar stars. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. Carter scanned the jungle edge with his scope. No movement, but he still felt its ties on him, not just animal eyes, eyes that knew. He returned to the cave and checked Ilari. She shifted in her sleep, mumbling softly in her own language, her. Fingers twitched like she was dreaming. He touched her shoulder gently. She woke with a small gasp, then calmed when she saw him. "What is it?" she asked in her soft voice. Carter knelt beside her and spoke slowly. "Someone's watching," he said. He pointed to his eyes, then to the trees outside. Ilari sat up, alert now. She reached for the small stone pendant she wore around her neck. She held it tightly, her eyes narrowing. Then, with her finger, she drew a shape in the dirt, a circle with 4 dots, one on each side. Carter looked at it, confused. "What's that?" She didn't know the word in his language, so she just said, "Old." He studied the symbol again. Something about it seemed familiar, maybe from a file, a war report, or an old cargo manifest. He couldn't place it, but it didn't feel like good news. The next morning, they returned to the crash site for more supplies. Ilari stayed closer to Carter now, her eyes scanning the trees. He tried to act calm, but even he jumped when a branch snapped behind them. Again, nothing. Just jungle, just silence. They gathered what they could, more rations, tools, and one small power cell. But before they left, Ilari walked to a fallen panel and scratched something on it. The same symbol she drew in the dirt. Carter didn't ask why, but he remembered it clearly that night. Ilari didn't sleep. She sat by the fire, hands around her knees, eyes fixed on the cave entrance. Carter offered her food. She shook her head. He sat beside her and finally asked, "What was that symbol?" She looked at him, then slowly answered, "My people call them the Watchers. They come when something valuable survives." Carter frowned. "Survivors like you." Ilari nodded. "They don't help," she whispered. "They just take." Carter looked outside, heart pounding. "Are they human?" She shook her head slowly. "No one knows what they are, but they want what doesn't belong to them." He gripped his weapon tighter. "How do we stop them?" Ilari answered in a low voice. "We don't fight them. We hide, we run, or we become theirs." Carter stared at the fire, the weight of her words sinking in. He had faced soldiers, pirates, raiders, storms, but never something like this. Something he couldn't shoot, couldn't see, that night. Ilari took her pendant off and placed it on the ground. She began humming a soft melody, ancient and sad. The stone glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The cave trembled slightly, and the shadows on the walls began to move not from the fire, but from something else. Carter stepped back, eyes wide. "What is that?" Ilari didn't stop humming, but her voice changed deeper, older. Not just a child's voice anymore. The shadows grew and then faded into stillness. She stopped, picked up the pendant, and said, They know I'm alive now." Carter looked at her. "You just called them?" She nodded. Better to know when they come than to wait for them in the dark. He couldn't argue, but he didn't like it. Not one bit. That night, neither of them slept. They sat back to back with their eyes on the cave walls, waiting. Breathing together, Carter didn't know what the Watchers were, or why they wanted her. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to lose her. Not now, not ever. He whispered quietly, "If they want you, they'll have to go through me, Ilari." Didn't reply, but she reached back and held his hand. And in the silence of the cave, as the stars watched from above, two hearts beat together. Prepared for whatever came next, the sun rose slowly over the broken jungle. Light spilled through the leaves, painting golden lines across the cave walls. Carter hadn't slept, neither had Ilari. They had spent the night in silence. Backs against stone, ears open, hearts tense, but the Watchers didn't come. Not yet. Ilari stirred first. Her eyes dull with exhaustion. She rubbed her fingers across her pendant. But it no longer glowed. "Quiet again," she whispered. Carter nodded. For now, they ate a small breakfast, half a ration bar each. There wasn't much left. Their supplies were low. Their water was running out. And worst of all, the power cell was almost empty. Carter checked his tools. He needed to repair the comlink if they had any hope of sending a distress call. But it wasn't just wires and metal that worried him. It was Ilari. She was changing. And not just from fear or pain. Her skin shimmered faintly in the sun. Her eyes sometimes flashed with light when she touched the stone pendant. Machines near her powered down or glitched small things, but too often to ignore. Later that day, Carter found an old medkit buried in his emergency pod. It was dusty and cracked, but one function still worked: DNA scan. He didn't tell Ilari. He waited until she was resting, her head tilted to the side, hair falling across her face. She looked peaceful. But he knew something inside her was not. He gently pressed the scanner to her wrist. It beeped once, then again, then it stopped. Carter frowned. The screen showed nothing familiar. No match for species. No known blood type, no standard code. Instead, it displayed a strange message. Prototype signature, Serra Luna class bioform detected. Carter's breath caught in his chest. He sat back slowly, staring at the screen. Serra Luna. That word again, the same one Ilari had drawn in the dirt. The symbol scratched onto the wreckage. He had seen the term once before, on a warning report during his military days, a secret file, locked and half-redacted. It spoke of something lost, something dangerous, a weapon, or maybe a miracle. He looked at Ilari again. She wasn't just a girl, she was created, engineered with ancient biotech, alive but not born, real but designed. She opened her eyes slowly and saw the scanner in his hand. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. She looked down at her wrist, then back at him. "I'm not sick," she said. Her voice was small, but clear. "I didn't ask for this." Carter closed the medkit and sat beside her. "I know," he said softly. "I'm not afraid of you." She looked into his eyes, searching for doubt, but found none. Only worry, only care, only the same human who had pulled her from the water and promised to stay. She took a deep breath. "My real name is not Ilari. That was given to me by the crew. My first name was Test 9. Carter flinched. "Test." She nodded. "They built children to survive planets like this, to speak to machines, to calm storms, but most of us didn't survive." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I'm glad you did," he said. "I don't care where you came from." Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. "I'm not a weapon," she whispered. "I just want to live." Carter nodded. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll live, but deep inside." He knew it wouldn't be that easy. If someone had made her, someone would come to take her back. Maybe the Watchers weren't ghosts. Maybe they were retrieval units sent to collect what was lost. That night, Ayalari sat by the fire, the pendant glowing again. She hummed softly, and the stones around her began to hum too. She was stronger than before, stronger than she realized. Carter watched her from the shadows, not in fear, but in awe. She had gone from drowning in silence to singing with the earth beneath her. He whispered quietly to himself, "She's not just alive, she's awakening." And far beyond the jungle, beyond the stars, a signal had been received, a voice. In the dark replied, "Sarah Luna prototype confirmed. Proceed with recovery." The stars were quiet that night. The jungle slept, and even the wind held its breath. Carter sat near the cave entrance, rifle across his lap. His eyes were sharp. But tired, he had felt something shift deep in his gut, like the silence before. A Storm Ayalari was inside, drawing symbols in the dirt with her finger. She wasn't humming this time. She was focused, her eyes glowing softly in the dark, lines, curves. Circles each stroke had purpose. Carter had asked her what it meant. She only said, "A warning." Suddenly, a flash lit the sky. A blue pulse cut through the clouds like lightning. It was silent, but Carter knew exactly what it was. A drop signal. Someone had landed, and they were close. He grabbed his pack, checked his rifle, and rushed inside. "They found us," he said quickly. Ayalari stood without a word. She already knew. "How many?" she asked. Carter looked at the scanner. 3 ships, small, fast, and fully armed. "Too many," he said. To ready, Ayalari closed her eyes. "I'll go," she whispered. Carter stared at her. "What?" "If I go to them," she said, "maybe they'll leave you alone." He shook his head, firm and fierce. "No," he said, "not a chance. I told you I'd never leave you. And I won't let you go to them." She looked up. At him, "They won't stop. They're not here to ask questions. They're here to take." Carter gritted his teeth. "Then we make them regret it, within minutes." They had packed the essentials: water, tools, the working beacon, and her pendant. They left the cave behind. The jungle stretched ahead, silent and dark, but they didn't stop. Didn't look back. Above them, drones flew silently through the sky, not searching, hunting. Machines without emotion, without rest, as they ran. Carter glanced at Ayalari. She didn't seem scared, only calm, focused, like a part of her had been waiting for this moment. They reached a narrow ravine surrounded by thick vines and high rock. "This way," Ayalari said. Carter followed, trusting her completely, even if he didn't know where it led. But the drones were faster. One of them spotted them and fired. A warning pulse. It struck the ground near Carter's foot, spraying dirt and fire. Ayalari turned around, raised both hands, and something strange happened. The drone stopped. It hovered mid-air, twitching like it was confused. Its lights flickered red, yellow, then blue, then it dropped to the ground, completely dead. Carter stared. "You did that?" Ayalari looked at her hands, glowing faintly. "I didn't try," she said softly. It just listened before they could speak again. 3 more drones appeared above the trees. This time, no hesitation. They opened fire. Carter pushed Ayalari to the ground, rolled, and returned shots from behind a rock. He hit one, barely scratching it. The second circled around, cutting off their exit. The third locked onto Ayalari. Preparing a capture field, she stood up, eyes glowing brighter. "No," she whispered. "You don't get to take me." She stepped forward, and the ground beneath her pulsed with light. The vines on the cliffs shivered, then reached out like arms. They wrapped around the drone, pulling it down. Metal cracked. Wires sparked, and it was gone. Carter stared in disbelief. "You're connected to the world," he said. Ayalari nodded slowly. "They made me to speak to systems. But I hear everything now. The plants, the machines, even the sky. They ran again, deeper into the ravine. Behind them, more soldiers dropped into the jungle. They weren't masked. Their armor was marked with the Seraluna crest, shining silver over black. One of them stepped forward, helmet off. He looked almost human, but his eyes were fully black. He pointed at Ilari. "Return now," he said, voice cold. "You are property of the Seraluna vault." Carter raised his weapon. "She's not property." He said, "She's a person. She's mine." The soldier raised a hand. The others took aim. But before the first shot was fired, Ilari stepped forward, her pendant glowed, and the air around her shimmered. She whispered something ancient, soft, strong, and full of power, and the earth cracked. A shockwave blasted outward. The soldiers were thrown back, weapons fried. Carter ran to her, catching her before she collapsed. "You okay?" he asked, breathless. She nodded, weak but smiling. "I'm not done yet," she whispered, "but I need you." He held her close. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I promised." And as the jungle burned behind them, they ran forward. Together, not just to escape, but to survive, to live. Because she wasn't a test. She wasn't a target. She was someone worth fighting for, and Carter had already made his choice. He'd die before he let them take her again. Smoke rose behind them. The jungle was burning. The air smelled like ash, metal, and fear. Carter held Ilari tightly as they ran. Her legs moved, but she was slower now. The power she had released had drained her. Still, she kept going. Because she knew they had no choice, the soldiers would regroup. The Watchers, whoever they truly were, would not give up. And the jungle, once alive and quiet, had turned into a battlefield. They followed the river. It had grown wider after the last storm. Its surface shimmered like silver. But its current moved like a beast. Fast, strong, unpredictable. Carter paused at the edge. He looked behind them, then at Ilari. "We can't outrun them forever," he said. She nodded. "There's a way down the river," she whispered, "but it's dangerous." Carter gave a tired smile. "Good," he said. "We're good at dangerous." They found a broken raft, half buried in the mud. Carter used rope and a piece of torn armor to patch it up. He tied their supplies tightly and helped Ilari climb on. Then he pushed off the shore with a branch and jumped aboard. The current took them fast. Branches whipped past them. Water splashed high. Carter kept one hand on the rope, the other gripping the side. Ilari sat in the center, her pendant still glowing weakly. She kept her eyes closed, breathing slow and deep. "I'm listening," she said softly, to the river. Carter didn't ask what that meant. He had stopped questioning her long ago. Some things had no answer, only trust behind them. The forest lit up with another blast. A blue flare shot into the sky. Then came the sound engines, low and cold. Another dropship was on its way. Carter cursed under his breath. "They're tracking us." Ilari opened her eyes and pointed to the left. "There is a bend ahead, if we take it." We reached the old passage, the water tunnel. He nodded and pushed the raft toward the bend. The ship appeared behind them, moving fast above the trees. Searchlights swept the water. Then came the sharp sound of drone wings. 3 black machines dropped from the ship and dove straight toward the raft. Their arms opened, revealing nets and shock darts. Carter raised his rifle and fired. One drone burst in the air, its pieces raining into the river. Ilari stood shakily on the raft. The pendant around her neck flared to life. She spread her arms wide. The river beneath them answered. A wave rose not from wind, but from her. It crashed into the 2 drones, dragging them under. Carter pulled her back down. "You all right?" She nodded, sweat on her forehead. "Not for long," she whispered. "It hurts when I use it now." The raft entered the tunnel, a dark hole in the canyon wall. It was barely wide enough. The light behind them disappeared, swallowed by stone and shadow. Inside, the world went silent. Only the sound of water and breath remained. Carter lit a small lamp, its orange glow dancing on the walls. Ilari leaned against him, her voice low. "I can't hold it back much longer." He looked down at her. "What do you mean?" "My power," she said. "It's changing. It wants to protect. But it also wants to break things." Carter placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then I'll be here to remind you. You're not a weapon. You're someone who survived." She smiled weakly. "You say that like it's easy." He nodded. "It's not. But I'll say it every day if I have to." The tunnel opened into a hidden lake. The raft drifted to shore. Carter jumped down first, pulling it onto land. He helped her step onto solid ground. She almost collapsed, but he caught her. They made camp under the rocks, a quiet space, far from scanners and weapons, a place the enemy wouldn't expect, not yet. Carter patched her cuts and covered her with a blanket. The fire crackled beside them, small but warm. He sat beside her, staring into the flames. "She's not just rare." He whispered to himself. "She's impossible." Ilari opened her eyes. "You're still here," she said softly. He looked at her and smiled. "I told you, I'm not leaving." Outside, the stars rose again. The smoke behind them faded. But the threat had not disappeared. It was still out there, coming. But Carter didn't fear it. Because he had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. The stars above were brighter than before, clear, soft, and endless. The jungle behind them was still burning in places. But here, near the edge of the ancient lake, there was peace. Carter stood near the water, watching it ripple under moonlight. His clothes were torn, his hands cut, his rifle nearly out of charge, but he was still standing, still breathing. Behind him, Ilari rested under the stone shelter. Her body was weak, her energy drained. But her eyes were open. She was alive. She looked up at the sky, her silver hair glowing faintly in the starlight. "Are we safe here?" she asked. Carter turned back to her and gave a tired smile. "For now," he said. "But we can't stay long." Ilari sat up slowly, holding the pendant around her neck. The glow inside it had faded. It was quiet now, just like her. Carter knelt beside her. "I found something," he said. He pulled a small device from his pack. It was cracked, but the light on its screen was green. A signal. She looked at it, eyes wide. "You fixed the beacon." He nodded. "It's weak, but strong enough to call someone." She touched the edge of the device with her fingers. For a second, the light grew brighter. "Someone good?" she asked. Carter smiled. "Someone I trust, far above the moon." Hidden in a quiet orbit, a signal blinked on a forgotten console. A listening post, long abandoned, stirred to life, and deep inside. An old friend of Carter's, Captain Reyes, sat up in surprise. "Carter," she whispered, "after all this time." She tapped the panel, opened the channel. "Send your coordinates, soldier. We're coming." Back on the ground, Carter sat beside Ilari. Her head leaned against his shoulder. "You kept your promise," she whispered. He looked at her. "I always will." She smiled. But there was something else in her eyes, something deeper. Fear, not of the jungle, not of the soldiers or machines, but of herself. "My power," she said softly. "It's not gone. It's only sleeping." Carter nodded. "I know, but we'll learn how to live with it together," she said. "Always." He replied. Hours passed. The sun began to rise. Golden light painting the lake. A soft hum filled the air. And then a ship appeared through the clouds. Not black and sharp like the enemies, but silver and worn. With blue lights that pulsed like a heartbeat, it hovered above the trees, scanning the ground. Carter stood and raised a flare. The ship responded. Lowering a lift, Captain Reyes stepped out first, helmet under her arm. Her eyes locked on Carter, still saving the galaxy. "Huh?" she said with a smirk. Carter chuckled. Just one life this time. Reyes looked at Larry. The girl stood, swaying slightly. Her eyes met the captain's, and for a moment no one spoke. Then Larry bowed. "I'm not a weapon," she said. "I just want to live." Reyes stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then let's make sure you do," she said. "No more cages." They boarded the ship together. Carter held Larry's hand the whole way. Not because she needed him, but because he wanted her to. No, she wasn't alone as the ship lifted. Into the sky, the jungle below faded. The fire, the fear, the fighting it all grew smaller. And ahead of them, space opened like a promise. On board, Larry sat near the window. Watching the stars move past, she turned to Carter. "Where do we go now?" He shrugged. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe." She nodded slowly. "Can we build something, like a home?" He smiled. "We can build anything." She leaned her head on his shoulder again. Her eyes slowly closed, and this time, there were no nightmares, only dreams. Dreams of rivers that didn't drown. Dreams of stars that didn't burn. Dreams of a human who dove in without hesitation and stayed. Because sometimes the strongest promise, isn't shouted across battlefields. It's whispered by someone who means it. You'll never be alone again. And this time, it was true.